Hello, welcome to the podcast, Human Rights in America, a Revolutionary Mindset. I am your host, Sue Young. Thank you for listening. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. You can contact me via email with your comments at hrinamerica, all one word, at gmail.com. For those of you who are just joining me, welcome to Human Rights in America, a revolutionary mindset. Today's episode is simply one of reflection taken from a prior episode, episode 4. After the recent election, I thought I'd reiterate some important points. This episode was the hardest to record because it dawned on me that this is a great undertaking, this revolution, asking people to move from their comfort zones to action is a huge undertaking. I was reminded of my why for starting this podcast. I wanted to be the change that I want to see. I have no great technical skills. I'm not famous, nor do I have a team behind me producing this podcast. Nope, it's just me and a microphone. It's me believing that Americans deserve more human rights. Human rights are the one thing that binds us to each American and each human being on the planet. Wow. To be reminded of that great common denominator. We don't have to wait for apocalyptic movies like Armageddon to remind us of this. We are not as diverse as the animal kingdom, so this human thing should be a walk in the park, right? Well, it's not. I think Americans can do better, and there's no time like the present to bring this step up or to bring it back up. No, human rights won't put money in your accounts or put food on your table. But for me, it gives me back the power that I've given over to the news, social media, and politicians. We, the people, that's us. So having decided that I am no longer afraid to stand alone, I started this podcast, looking for a way out of our current mindsets. Will you join me in my revolution? If you're just joining, I usually start with a motivational quote or question. I give you a roadmap of the episode, talk about the topic, and close. I think America should be the leader in human rights. I think we could, I think we should, and I think we would be if given enough attention to it. But we're not. Although we talk the talk, we haven't made the leaps and bounds as other countries, from amending our Constitution, even in the minor ways, to educating Americans, incorporating human rights into our laws. Sure, many countries that signed the UN Declaration of 1948 have violated the rights people, but aren't we all a work in progress? America has gone back on its words in the Constitution from the very beginning. All men are created equal at a time when they had slavery. America has many failures, but it's not the failures that we should be remembered by, but rather how we overcame them and moved forward. I'm still reaching for the stars. Yes, some of these rights are going to trigger you and perhaps make you retreat to your well-known boxes on issues. I'm definitely not here to address any political stance one way or the other. Rather, I'm here encouraging you, each of you, to get out of the mental boxes that we've placed ourselves in and put yourselves in tomorrow. or years into the future and ask, what if? How do we push past the thinking of today to get to a more creative freedom in this country? If you find yourself stuck in your feelings, maybe work backwards so that you can be creative instead of stuck or paralyzed. You could pretend that we've already solved these issues and work backwards, asking yourselves, how did we do that? Earlier in my professional career, someone advised me that when you have an elephant sized problem and don't know where to start, just start. Start on the toes. You don't have to have a solution to everything to get started. She also taught me that anytime you can identify a problem, that's the first step. And it is important, but even more important is starting to that next step, looking for a solution. If you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, then change the way you think about it. I don't have the answers, but think back to a time when our framing fathers created this country. They wanted to break away from a king. They weren't perfect and were faced with their own moral dilemmas. But nevertheless, they created the framework for democracy that has lasted over 200 years and counting. One article that I wanted to revisit of the UN Declaration of 1948 is Article 25. Article 25 states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond your control. In short, I believe that Americans should have subsidized health care. After all, we are the foundation of this country. Our health care should not be dependent on the work that we do. Our lives on this planet isn't a result of our work at a business. Here's the story. An older woman, a friend of mine, shared this story of a current decision that she had to make. Should she spend her savings on future health care expenses or buy a new car? She chose the car. I simply said that I don't think that we, Americans, should have to make that kind of choice. In response, almost immediately and emphatically, she said, we can't follow the healthcare like Australia. It will increase our taxes. I was astonished. Look, there are 43 countries that provide free health care or at least cover 90% of health care for its citizens. Brazil is the only country that provides free health care. Even India, with over 1 billion people, provide health care to their citizens. The U.S. joins 83 countries that don't. And we're one of the richest countries on the planet. This is just my opinion. But most people live one bad illness away from bankruptcy in this country because our healthcare costs are skyrocketing unchecked. But I don't think the donut shop owner or the corporation were meant to subsidize the workers' health care. So, what if? In the 1980s, people believed that we would become like Russia if we provided health care. Socialists. So we did not. But some of the countries that do now are our allies. I think America hasn't done enough. Some countries have amended their constitutions to include the right to health care as a human right and provide it. Some believe in it and aspire to cover health care. For us, the Affordable Health Care Act was the first step, kind of like putting square wheels on your cars. But I know we have smart people in this country that could come up with something, especially when on any given weekend, we're given the 100-year stats from lots of sports. I know that someone can review how countries as large as ours provide health care to their citizens. I don't have an answer, but I wanted to bring that up again. I read inspirational examples of great Americans doing hard things and making difficult decisions when it was unpopular to do so. I read how, before their deaths, Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. both considered turning to human rights to aid the civil rights movement. As Mandela stated, where there is poverty, there is no freedom. And reducing or eliminating poverty is not a charity act. It is a human right. Healthcare is a human right. It is not an act of charity. So what if? I want to encourage you to think about not what you see presently, but rather what we can aspire to be tomorrow and in the future. We have to start somewhere. Proverbs 4:6-7 says, "Do not forsake wisdom. She will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you." The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. We've been living all this time without knowing about human rights, so why do we need them now? Well, because, like Alice Walker says in her quote, the most common way that people give up their power is when they think they don't have any. Here, I'm reminded of the book Animal Farm by George Orwell, a story that I read later in life. Ordinary individuals, or in his case, animals, who forego their better judgment in letting a totalitarian regime dictate a false reality. There's not enough, that some people deserve more than others, that poverty should be ridiculed as opposed to taken care of by this country. We are not what we see on TV or social media. We are great leaders, inventors, scientists, philosophers, actors, dancers, dreamers, musicians. We are life. Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "Communism forgets that life is individual. Capitalism forgets that life is social." And I add and reinterpret, the ideal of brotherhood lies somewhere in between the two. Humanity is the great denominator, no matter how we choose to function as a society. Until next time, be revolutionary, be human.